Welcome back to Start Kyle Orton. This is like episode 10, Kyle. Welcome to the tens.
I know we're rolling along, and for folks who we're not late this week. If it feels like we're late,
No.
it's just that we went early last week. So I'm sorry you have had to wait 9 or 10 days for us, but we're still here. Don't you worry. And yeah, so tonight we talked about our reaction to the Bears draft. We're gonna kind of wrap up our draft coverage tonight, finally, I think, by talking a little bit about what other teams did in the draft, especially with a focus on what our division rivals did in the draft, because they all had very interesting drafts in different ways. But we had just a couple matters of Bears housekeeping.
That's right.
To begin with. The schedule dropped today. Do we have any response to that, or do we want to do we want to save that for later and go through and do our forecasting later on? Do we want to do that?
I mean, I think we could do a deep dive. Like, we might as well state the obvious. The very first game is at home against Green Bay, and pretty much depending on what happens in that game, I may either just stunt on every Green Bay Packers fan near me, or you may never see me again.
Yeah, I mean, I had a tweet that is still getting retweeted right now. It went as viral as one of my tweets ever goes, I guess, where I said, basically, the ground rules for that game are as follows. If the Bears lose, well, I mean, weird shit happens week 1 every year, long season, one game doesn't matter. If the Bears win, then weep, Green Bay fans, for the time of reckoning is at hand. Doom is upon you. You will suffer and hear nothing but torture and death and destruction, and you will feel our wrath. For 35 years we have taken this shit, and now it's time for payback.
I'm prepared to do that. I'm prepared.
Yeah, other than that, I mean, so not to put too much weight on that, but yeah, let's not, yeah, we'll save that for later.
Give me a quick tease here, because I've been hyping up our schedule for months now. Now that you can see all the teams in one tweet, Kyle, do you agree with me? This is a weak-ass schedule for the Bears.
I mean, it is a weak-ass schedule. You have accused me of hedging on how good, and we'll get into official predictions later. But you've accused me of hedging, but there is just so much that I need to see before, because, I mean, depending on how this offense comes together around Justin Fields, and depending on if Justin Fields makes that leap that we both feel strongly he can make with a good situation, this schedule is weak. And I mean, I think the true talent level of this roster in the aggregate is like a 7-win team, but that quarterback could either make them a 5-win team or an 11-win team. The schedule is conducive to that for sure. There are lots of toss-ups, and there are ways he can make sure that those toss-ups tilt our way. So, I mean, we'll get into that later, more detail. But yeah, it is not the most imposing schedule in the world. That's for sure. There is not a lot of games that you put at Kansas City. There's, other than that, there are not too many games you point to and you're like, oh, we're getting fucked there. And I mean, I'm sure Lions fans will tell us that we need to be afraid of them right now. And I totally agree. You guys are the betting favorite in the division. We'll talk about that here in a little bit when we talk about their draft. If you had to ask me who's going to win the NFC North this year, right now I'm saying the Lions. But at the same time, do you ever look at them and go, boy, fuck, is there any way we could beat the Lions? Yeah. There's not that level of fear. So, I mean, there are good teams on the schedule, but none of them that I'm like, oh. Last year you looked at that schedule and you were like, the Eagles, fuck. The Bills, fuck. The 49ers, fuck. And they ended up winning that one. But
and
still,
we won that game somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have 4 playoff teams, 17 games, 4 playoff teams, and 2 of those are against the Vikings, who I think are going to fall apart.
And they can also really help their cause by beating the Panthers head-to-head this year, so improve that draft pick themselves. That might honestly be their biggest game of the year if you think about it. So there's a lot at stake there. I hope not, but yeah, we'll see. But yeah, no, the other Bears housekeeping, this is going to be a weekly recurring thing for us. Travis wants to make excuses for Jervin Dexter. Jervin, yeah. So go ahead, Travis. What was it Jervin said? Get your Jervin out. We're swerving with Jervin again.
You're burying the lead here. All right, rookie minicamp happened, and of course,
it did.
A ton of very useful news came out.
Oh yeah, you gotta love rookie minicamp.
We know exactly what's going to happen with these rookies now, Kyle, don't we? Just rookie minicamp gave it all away. But there was interesting stuff that came out. I mean, first of all, we should pat ourselves on the back. The Bears coaching staff seems to think Darnell Wright has nothing to learn but maybe a few things with his hands, and they just want him to read the playbook. So that's nice. Pat yourself on the back. It
sounds like he also, I mean, he is a big boy, and it sounds like he needs to maybe get up to some NFL conditioning a little bit. But we got a long way till September for him to get there. Training camp's coming, big fella. So you'll get there.
We're in May, yeah.
Sounds like Tyreek Stevenson was flashing early, so that's good.
Comments from the coaching staff kind of solidifies him as the outside guy. Seems like they want to keep Tyler inside, Tyreek's outside.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, I mean, it's kind of a lot like we talked about with the wide receiver room, where DJ Moore is a true number one wide receiver, but what he also does is he allows Mooney and Claypool to be better because they won't get extra attention and they'll play the roles that actually fit them. In this corner room, I mean, we don't have a DJ Moore type dude yet, but getting a guy like Tyreek, if he can be competent on the outside, that lets you leave Kyler in the nickel, not bounce him back and forth, let him focus on the role. And I mean, Eberflus talked about this nickel defense, or nickel corner in this defense is tough. It is maybe the most mentally and in some ways physically demanding position in this defense other than like the 3 technique. I mean, it's that important. That guy's got to be able to play the run. He's often their best blitzer. He has to be able to read the play quickly. It's a tough role to learn, and they ask a lot. So letting Kyler focus on that, I think, will be very good for him. But anyways, last but not least, on the rookie minicamp front, Jervin Dexter said some stuff that you want to address this issue.
Yeah.
Skip. You know I am sensitive to Jervin Dexter's slow get-off. But!
That's right. But, I mean, we kind of heard about it at the draft. Poles wanted to immediately come out and talk about basically why Jervin looked the way he did at Florida. And Jervin just got in front of a mic and told us exactly how he played. And essentially, it's actually worse than I thought. I thought at Florida the deal was they were telling him, stand still, mirror the guy in front of you to stop the run. And because of that, he was slow off the block in the pass game. From what Jervin was saying, it's the whole hog. They wanted him to never do anything but mirror. They never wanted him to get off to a head start. They wanted him to stand up, look at his man, mirror his guy, and plug holes, and that was it. So, I mean, the guy never got a chance to really use any explosion off the block. I don't know if he has it, but looking at his film, that was one thing that I brought up all those weeks ago, was this dude just stands up and looks in the backfield. What the fuck is wrong with him?
I haven't seen a guy stay that stationary at the line since like a French rifleman on the Western Front.
The funny thing, now look, Pickens didn't say anything about his role. That guy just seems happy to be here. He's just happy to be nominated.
Pickens,
but I think he did the same thing.
I would like to think of that with Pickens. I think Pickens is they're kind of mirror opposites. Yeah, they're opposites of each other in that Jervin is this dude that had basically no get off, but he often did win reps later in the down. He overcame with strength and things like that. Whereas Pickens is very much a dude with a first step, and I think that's why he was good as a pass rusher, but did not hold the point of attack very well against the run. Pickens either won at the snap or didn't win at all. I mean, he either wins immediately or he loses. So I think the funniest possible explanation is that the Bears coaching staff actually did want both of these guys for the same position, and they just couldn't decide which was like better, a guy with no get off but size and strength, or a guy with a good get off who gets pushed back a lot. And they were like, well, let's just draft both and see which one figures it out. So that would be the funniest possible explanation, I think. But
I very much think that they're trying to go 1 for 2 here. I think they're like, if we draft both, one of them will work. I mean,
yeah, I think they're thinking.
Right?
Yeah, I think they're thinking like, we will find either our 1 technique or our 3 technique from these 2 guys, and then we'll draft whichever one we don't have next year. So it could definitely be possible. But yeah,
I just thought it was an interesting story, and I think it's interesting because it's just becoming a weekly tradition to shit on the University of Florida here.
Yeah,
and I wanted to do it again. They really suck.
Yeah. So anyway, so now we have talked about Dexter and all that. We're going to transition back to the NFL draft. We're going to look around a little bit, just a little bit around the league in general. I just have a couple of teams I did want to comment on. And you might, most of these are just following up on the stuff that if you guys listened to us during the draft were the thoughts we had. I did actually want to revisit one thing, which is that the more I think about it, as initially defensive of it as I was at the time, the Texans really did give up a whole fucking lot.
They sure did.
Yeah. 12, 33, and a future for that is a lot. That is a whole fucking hell of a lot, man. And I had this thought, so I was like, okay, we talked about this a lot. We are not Lucas Van Ness fans. But theoretically, the Texans could have taken Stroud at 2, stayed still, taken Lucas Van Ness at 12 as their edge rusher prospect, and they would still have retained pick 33 and 2 firsts next year. And I have to say, as much as I didn't really care for Lucas Van Ness, and as much as I like Will Anderson, the more I've thought about it, the more I've looked at that price tag, I think I would feel better as a Texans fan if they'd done that. But on the other hand, I mean, all it takes is Will Anderson to actually live up to his potential. Because if they have actually, if they truly have drafted their franchise quarterback and the next Khalil Mack in the same draft, the cost is never going to fucking matter. You will take that draft every time. But if Will Anderson is...
It's a good spot for Will Anderson.
If Will Anderson is anything but that, that price tag is going to fall on purpose. I mean, even just like... Well, think of the last time the Houston Texans drafted an edge rusher that high. This is the team that's drafted an edge rusher number 1 overall twice in Jadeveon Clowney and Mario Williams. And both of those guys were very good, but not great players. They never were quite who they were expected to be, even though they were solid, competent, even Pro Bowl at times players. And that just goes to show, the kind of player you need to be as an edge rusher, taken that high after a trade of that magnitude, it's not going to be enough for Will Anderson to just be a solid 7-8 sack dude. If he is not peak Khalil Mack, and for longer than Khalil Mack was peak Khalil Mack, that price is going to be steep forever, and I don't know that he's ever going to live up to it. So I initially was like, oh no, that's fine, you got to do it. I can't complain about that, but given enough time, I have remembered that it is my nature to complain, and if I could, I would complain about that. Yeah, so I think I do think it was rich. I will give it to Travis on draft night. He was there already. That's rich. I don't know that I could have made that trade myself.
Yeah, you're talking about Lucas Van Ness, but let's think about guys who are available there who we would have liked at 12, like Kalijah Kancey,
Nolan Smith
going at 19, Nolan Smith, who fell all the way to 30th?
Yeah,
30th. So,
which brings up my next point that I
we really liked, and I would have taken either of those guys, as I said before the draft, over Will Anderson. So,
yeah, it's a lot. I still think you're kind of crazy for that. I love Nolan Smith. I still don't love him more than Will Anderson.
And like I said, this is a really good spot for Will Anderson, so he's going to show out.
Yeah, so you did bring up Nolan Smith going 30th. This is just a quick point, but again, Howie Roseman is the best at this. God, you got to quit handing that guy loaded guns to let him shoot you with. I don't understand why they keep doing. We have reached the point
Speaking of loaded guns, Jalen Carter on TikTok showing blood signs to everybody. Nice job, Jalen.
I won't pretend to have any understanding of what that might mean. if that's what that actually was. But yeah.
Did you miss that? Jalen Carter
heard
going out there and doing the work for us.
I heard about it. Well, I know the more important thing is did you see that he was served with a lawsuit for wrongful death for $40 million.
Yep.
So I will say I do understand not wanting to draft a guy at number 9, which again we talk about the Bears. The Bears could not afford to get nothing from this pick, and when you got a guy being sued for $40 million for wrongful death before he's even taken a snap, it's not the best. It's not the best start. It's not ideal.
A little
it's
concerned
not
about that.
It's not what you want. So yeah, I mean, so again, but we both feel very confident in Nolan Smith, and if they get nothing from Jalen Carter, we think Nolan Smith will perform like a top 10 pick, and no one will even notice. So yeah, the Eagles played it very well. The two last things I want to talk about before we transition into the NFC North. One, and they kind of tie together. One, so that when the Steelers made that trade with the Patriots to move up from 17 to 14,
sure,
and all they got for it was a 4th round pick, we both were like, damn, that is light for 3 spots in the top 15. That is super light. And then Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus, he's their cap guy, literally has written the book on draft trades. Brad Spielberger said that this was literally the second cheapest trade up in the top 15 that he could find going back to like 2010, I think it was. So, I mean, Bill Belichick basically gave that pick away for pennies on the dollar, and no one could figure out why. And now this comes from Jason La Canfora, who is not always the most reliable person in the world, but it basically boils down to Bill Belichick's lifelong feud with the New York Jets. This man let the Pittsburgh Steelers jump to 14 for basically nothing, precisely because he just knew that the Jets wanted Broderick Jones, and he knew that that's who the Steelers were going to take, and he did it literally just to spite the Jets, which just, you could argue whether that's a good decision or not. I think Bill Belichick's made a lot of questionable roster decisions over the last decade that the lack of Tom Brady has really exposed. But I think we can agree that it's extremely hilarious. And it's also really funny that the Jets moving from 13 to 15 in the Aaron Rodgers trade, which didn't feel that big at the time, ended up costing them the player they wanted. And then led them to take Will McDonald at 15, a player that I think we both kind of liked as like a 2nd round pick. But at 15, wow. Just a real staggering sequence of events there.
Yeah, the Jets definitely had one of the worst drafts. Definitely not the worst. Everybody in the North, in my opinion, has a really good shot at the worst draft, but the Jets had one of the worst. The Steelers, who you mentioned,
I thought had a fantastic
took 5
draft.
guys that I like. They had a great draft.
The Steelers had a great draft, and I mean, we do not like to hand it to this man, but I thought Chris Ballard had a fantastic draft. I mean, talk about setting your
something nice to say about him. But
talk about setting your balls on the table. He didn't trade up. He kept his picks, and he ended up turning him into Anthony Richardson, Josh Downs. He got Adetomiwa. I mean, that is a solid draft. I can't knock him for it.
I mean, we laughed at him. We laughed at him for weeks. Like, what's he supposed to do now?
We thought,
I guess, just let Anthony Richardson fall into his lap is what he was supposed to do.
Yeah. So I mean, it took guts, and he stuck to his process, and I mean that's the process argument. If you are the process nerd, the process argument is if you don't panic and you do the right thing more often than not, you might get Anthony Richardson to fall into your lap. I don't know.
Yeah, so, I mean, you said balls on the table draft. I don't think there's a better way to explain this. Neither of us really pay attention to 5th round picks or later, but the 5 dudes that they took, Anthony Richardson, Julius Brents, Josh Downs, Blake Freeland, and Tomey, who ended up falling like 2.5 rounds beyond where we thought he was going to go. These are 5 dudes who are either going to really be something or are going to be completely useless.
I mean, so Poles and Ballard are close. These are dudes who came up together in the same front office. They have history together in Kansas City. Poles and Ballards know each other very well. And you can see a lot of similarities in how they drafted this year and the boomer bust guys that they bet on, the athletic traits that they prioritized. So definitely neither one of them is afraid to bet big on their coaching staff, basically. But yeah, no, the last thing I wanted to say, NFC North related, but it was related to what that Jets thing we just talked about, is we had talked about this before the draft, how so incredibly uncomfortable we were with the idea of not taking a tackle high, because we said that tackle run is going to happen. And I was saying, if even in the situation where the Bears got 17 and 32, like we talked about in that theoretical Steelers trade, if they didn't take a tackle at 17, and even at 17, the good ones might all be gone, and you might be talking about taking Anton Harrison at 17. And if you don't take him at 17, at 32, I don't even know if he was going to be there. And that's exactly what happened. The guys that everyone agreed were like the top 4 tackles, PJJ, Skoronski, Wright, Broderick Jones, all of them were gone even before pick 15 had occurred. Mm-hmm. And then Harrison came around and he went, 27th to the Jaguars?
Yep.
So even if they had waited till pick 32 to address tackle, there was not a guy that you feel super comfortable with. I mean, Bergeron was the guy I think you would talk yourself into there at that point, is the need. But I mean, he's a questionable pass blocker, and he went to the Cowboys, right? The Cowboys grabbed him, didn't they?
I do not know. Did it?
Hold on, I'm looking it up. Matthew Bergeron. I thought he went to the Cowboys.
We're gonna look it up.
The Atlanta Falcons.
Falcons.
Ooh, yeah, the Falcons are listing him as a guard already. Their plan is to play him at left guard, and I mean that is going to be a fantastic offensive line. It really is. So yeah, I mean it's drafting a guy who another team has already basically moved to guard to be your starting right tackle as a rookie, not something that would have felt very good. So again, I mean, I know some people didn't like it. It was not the sexiest pick, but Darnell Wright at 9 or 10, where they ended up, was always going to be the smartest play. It really was, both for value and for need. That was the dude.
I just wonder where are all the people who were like, you have to take Jackson Smith and Jigba at 9 because that's the value pick.
The
right?
best player on the board.
You have to take best player available.
Best player on the board.
Where did Jackson Smith and Jigba
20th,
go?
Yeah.
Where did all 4 tackles go before him?
So the guys that I most often got into arguments with people about as the picks that they said would be, well, you best player available there. You don't just reach for need. Best player available there was going to be, people told me Jackson Smith and Jigba and Christian Gonzalez, too, were 2 guys. And they ended up going 17 and 20. So obviously the NFL as a whole did not agree that those 2 were the best player available there. So that did not happen.
Yeah. This is one thing we can trust ourselves about this in the future, because we were talking to each other almost daily. Like, I don't understand why the NFL, why all these mock drafts are saying these tackles are going to go after all of these guys when it seems like they're better prospects. And then we get to the draft. What does the NFL do? They agree they're better prospects than the rest.
So what I think that is a lot of evaluators agreed that these tackles were first round tackles, but I think they were like, in an ideal world, these tackles would go like 14, 15, 16, 17. Mm-hmm. But when you consider the fact that, like we said, there was going to be nobody that anybody feels confident starting at tackle in the second round, and when you consider shit like Mike fucking McGlinchey getting $60 million,
sure,
it was the same. It was what I was saying. Those guys are going to go higher than you expect, not lower. They were always going to go higher. Because the 4 guys that people did feel good about as starting caliber tackles, yes, people are going to lock that shit down immediately because you can't find it anywhere else in this draft. So yeah, that was why the pick at 10 was always, or at 9 or 10 was always going to be a tackle for us. So
Kyle, you just hit on a very interesting point. Now I wonder what a team might do. Like you said, the tackles, there were only 4 good ones, so they got pushed higher in the draft. Well, you would think that if a position like tight end and running back and inside linebacker had a bunch of talent in the draft, that you might take them later.
You might, yeah. So, good transition. So, yeah, so the Lions, and the thing about the Lions draft is, so we're going to talk about the Lions, the Vikings, and the Packers here, obviously. Mm-hmm. The Lions draft, I think, is, it entirely depends on what you're looking at when you say best or worst. In terms of the actual talent and fit and abilities of the players taken, I think the Lions had the best draft of these three teams, because I think every one of these guys is a good player. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a very good change of pace receiving third down back. And Jack Campbell, I think, is going to be a very good off-ball linebacker. And Sam Laporta, I think, is going to be a very solid starting tight end. I don't think he's necessarily going to be a star, but I think he's going to be pretty good. And I don't know that I can say that about some of the guys that we're going to talk about with the Vikings and the Packers. I don't feel confident that all their guys are going to be good. I do feel confident that all those first three Lions picks are going to be good football players. But as Stephen Ruiz wrote about this for The Ringer, and he was like, they have taken A-plus players at B-plus positions. It was where those guys... So even if you just... I think we talked about this too, like if they had traded down to 12, and at 12 they had taken Christian Gonzalez or Nolan Smith, and then at 18, even at 18, if they had reached there on either Jack Campbell or Jahmyr Gibbs, and then they had taken whichever one of those, maybe Jack Campbell's there at 33 then, if they take Gibbs at 18, then we start to say, it's a pretty good draft. But man, they took each of those guys about 15 to 20 spots ahead of where you would really feel comfortable actually taking them. It is just... it is the kind of draft... So the main thing about the Giants draft, or the Lions draft, is what it says about them and how they view their roster and how they view their team. And it's not what people expected. Yes. So right up until the moment they made those picks, when I was saying, wow, the Giants, why do I keep calling them the Giants? The Lions have made a lot of smart decisions since Brad Holmes took over as GM, since they started this rebuild. But there has just been this default assumption that the Lions basically took Goff in that deal as a placeholder, as a whatever, it's just to make the money out. This idea that Goff was always just there to be a guy until they got the guy, and in the meantime they were going to build up the rest of their roster. Mm-hmm. And if they were still doing that, if that was actually the plan, they would have either probably found a way to move up a little bit, maybe move up to 3, and take Anthony Richardson before the Colts took him, or they would have, I think, swung at some more premium positions, cornerback, edge rusher, etc., or defensive tackle, taking Jalen Carter even. But they didn't do that. What this looked like, them specifically plugging the holes on their 2023 roster with guys that have maybe not the highest ceiling, but that people expect to have high floors and to contribute immediately. And it feels like an all-in bet on Jared Goff. And if that was what all of this was building to, all these years of suffering for the Lions, trading away Stafford, getting those picks, and at this point, the rebuild is over. The Stafford picks are gone. They have no bonus picks left in all of this. They have used them all up. This is what they got for it. And it feels like it was all just to try to go in and try to win now with a quarterback that is a slightly lesser version of Stafford. They've gone all in to try to... It feels like a team that you've gone all in to go 10-7 and lose in the division round. Like, it's just...
Yeah.
It felt like there was a plan, and then it was clear that there was not a plan. Or that the plan... there's a plan, but the plan was obviously to try to win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. And the whole reason you got 3 first-round picks and all that for Matthew Stafford is because another team already fucking tried that and decided they couldn't do it.
Yep. Yeah, so I don't think this is necessarily an all-in bet on Jared Goff, but I do think it's an all-in bet on the Detroit Lions. I think they're saying our defense is ready, our whole offense is ready, everything is ready. We could win the Super Bowl with this team. That's absolutely what this tells me. To spend the number 12 pick on Jahmyr Gibbs is absolutely insane. That dude would have been available where they picked Brian Branch. And if they switch those picks, we probably wouldn't be talking about it so weirdly, right? Because we would say, you took the best safety in the draft, and then you took another running back at 45.
The defense some Lions fans have thrown at me about them taking Gibbs at 12 is that they have heard that the Jets were going to take him at 15. To which I say, then let the fucking Jets take him.
Fall.
I mean, yeah, even so. Say I believe you that Jahmyr Gibbs was going to go in the first round if you didn't take him. Say I believed that. Mm-hmm. Do you feel Jahmyr Gibbs at 12 is that much more valuable than, say, Zach Charbonnet? Where did he go? 50?
He went to, who did he go to? The Seahawks?
He went to the Seahawks, and he was in the second round. I think it was pick 50, pick 51. Yeah. So you turn around and take Charbonnet then. That's, you really think you're 52. Like what? Yeah, what do you think is the difference between Charbonnet and Gibbs in terms of total production over the course of their careers? Do you think it's worth the difference in the value between pick 12 and pick 52, 40 spots of value? Because I sure as shit don't. So if your defense of that pick is, well, someone else was going to take him in the first round, then fucking let them. Let them.
Nobody is laughing at you because you took a guy who wasn't going to be taken before the next round, right? We're laughing at you because you took this guy at all. We're laughing at you because you drafted a running back
because you thought the first round talent. Because you thought the best use of the 12th overall pick was a running back, and a tiny running back at that. This guy's not even going to be. So basically, we talked about this, but like they obviously they must have watched the Jaguars last year and saw Travis Etienne and thought that like he was the dude, like he was the reason. I don't know, he was the missing piece, and he was very helpful for the Jaguars offense, but I don't even know if like the Jaguars had that pick all over if they'd take Etienne where they took him in the first place. So that's so again, I don't know how to properly grade the Lions draft. I don't really do letter grades for draft anyways, but like, it's not that I think the Lions are suddenly not the division favorites or whatever because of this draft. I think they have made the 2023 Lions a better team than they were before. It's the cost of doing that is insane to me for what else they could have done.
I mean, let's put it this way. We spent a better part of the first hour of that draft podcast talking about how concerned we were about what the Lions were about to do. They had a chance. Like you said, maybe you take Christian Gonzalez, maybe you take a devastating pass rusher to pair with Aiden, and you've got a defense that is going to run this division for years. That's what we were worried about.
I mean,
instead what they did is they filled one hole on that defense, the one spot they did not really need to fill, the one that I'm not worried about at all, the one we just filled with one of the best inside linebackers in the league for $4 million per year, and they got Brian Branch, who's a safety, right? But he fell all the way to the 45th pick for a reason. Other than that, we've got a running back and a tight end. It's just not what they needed. And honestly, I'm gonna say, with all of the issues they have with betting, with the potential suspensions that are coming their way, maybe this team did get worse after this draft. Maybe because they went this route, they don't have backup. They could have taken a wide receiver. They could have taken Jackson Smith and Jigba or something.
Yeah, I mean, it really. I'm not. I should say I am not. I still think the Lions are the favorite to win the division in 2023. But like you said, I could have come out of this draft. I mean, if they had taken, neither one of us was even that big on Tyree Wilson as we talked about. But if they had taken Tyree Wilson at 6, I'd still be like, God. I mean, I have concerns about Tyree Wilson, but if he hits on that defensive line next to Aiden Hutchinson, fuck. Yep. And I'm not saying that about Jack Campbell, and I think he's going to be a good linebacker, but for the love of God, there are, 3 off-ball linebackers in all of football right now that are like truly foundational, game-changing pieces in the NFL. I mean, he has to be Bobby Wagner, or I mean, and not Bobby Wagner as he is today, but Bobby Wagner who he was 5 years ago, or he has to be Fred Warner to justify that draft slot. That's too much to put on anybody. So yeah, it's.
I mean, obviously, I should say I love Kevin Jack. I love Sam Laporta. I think they're both fantastic players.
They're good players. Yeah.
They're just not the kind of terrifying thing that I thought the Lions were going to end up with. I thought the Lions were going to have the Eagles draft, and I was going to be crying in my Cheerios. And here I am like, they've really cracked the door open for the Bears here. I thought we weren't going to have a shot. And now I'm like, you guys, you added people you just didn't need.
It was not...
I mean, Goff is a problem, but I do think this also suggests that they think their defense is just ready right now. And I don't think they showed that last year.
Yeah. They had a chance to step on the throat, and they did not take it. Is what it felt like. So
that's exactly what it is.
Now, so the Lions, we have said this was an all-in bet on the 2023 Lions. I'll tell you whose draft did not strike me as an all-in bet on the 2023 version of their roster, and that is the Green Bay Packers draft. And that draft is fascinating to me because, again, so we are not huge Lucas Van Ness fans, but the argument for taking him is that he is raw clay and he has all the tools and he is a Greek god, and if you're patient with him and you're willing to wait till year 2 or year 3, he could be something. And that is the optimistic argument for him from people who like him a lot more than us. Nobody, I have seen hardly anybody who's like, this guy, year 1, gonna be a terror. Yep. Nobody has said that. So, and then they took 2 tight ends, both of them, Tucker Kraft, and, I mean, neither one of us was fans of Luke Musgrave, but, again, everyone who did talk, even Luke Musgrave's biggest fans are like, yeah, he can't run routes. He's not a route runner. He doesn't know how to block. He doesn't always know where to line up. But, God, that raw athleticism, if you can coach him into being a player. So they went big on talent, they did. But every player they took is a guy that even hit their staunchest supporters think is going to be ready in 2024 or 2025. None of these guys are guys that and that tells us this is a team that maybe doesn't feel very good about their chances in 2023, and that probably tells you maybe they don't feel very, very good about the guy they have under center in 2023. And I've always said this about Jordan Love. When Brett Favre tried to unretire, when Brett Favre drew his line in the sand, the Packers, who had watched Aaron Rodgers every day, were like, fuck it, man, go be a New York Jet. We don't care. When Aaron Rodgers held them hostage, they bent over backwards and gave him $100 million and torqued their cap and were like, please, God, come back. Because otherwise we're starting Jordan Love and we're scared shitless. The only reason that they are now apparently willing to play Jordan Love, whom they wouldn't even pick up the 5th-year option on, who took kind of a coward's deal. I don't even feel like that deal he bet on himself at all. Is because they must think, like, this isn't a Super Bowl. Our window's closed. We're resetting. We're looking for long-term building blocks. So, yeah, it's a fascinating draft. I really don't actually have that much to say about the players in question because, again, these are guys that could be good. I don't know. But they're not going to be good this year. 2-3 years down the road, I don't know. They're clearly betting big on potential there, and in which case I can't really argue with the athletes they took. If you are going to try to be patient and develop a tight end, Luke Musgrave is probably the dude. We're both skeptical he'll ever be anything, but I agree, if you're going to take a great athlete tight end and think you can coach him up and commit to a long-term project, he's one of those dudes. But yeah, I think it's more fascinating what I think it says about how they feel about the rest of their roster and how they feel about their quarterback than anything.
Yeah, I mean, just plainly stated, this is a draft that screams to me that they want the number 1 pick in the draft next year. It's like, you know how I feel about Lucas Van Ness. I don't think he's going to amount to anything. I don't like Luke Musgrave either, so those 2 picks made me very happy.
Yeah.
But then they took another tight end in the third round, and that really fucking confuses me still. And the only thing I could think is they're just like, we can't take somebody who's going to make this team win a game this year, that's for damn sure. Take another tight end. They took Jaden Reed in the second round. Now, there's a wide receiver that I liked, but he's not a game changer. He's a good piece. He doesn't change anything for your team.
So I liked Jaden Reed, and I liked Tyler Scott, and I kind of thought Tyler Scott would go where Jaden Reed went, and Jaden Reed would go about where Tyler Scott went. Yep. Yeah.
This was too high for Jaden Reed, for sure.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
The only other pick they had before round 5 was a defensive end, Colby Wooden, and I think you've already said enough about defensive ends taken in the 4th round. It's just it's a throwaway pick, essentially. So none of these guys helped them this year. I think some of them are just not going to help them at all. And all I could think was they think they have a shot at Caleb Williams, and this is the year to do it. Just be as bad as you can, get your next quarterback.
I mean, it seems like their front office is very much like, okay, they signed that deal with Jordan Love that kind of hedges where it's like, all right, if he does turn out to be good, we did retain his rights for one more year, so we can make something out of that. But it does not seem like they are expecting that, and they're basically, it seems like they're saying pretty much like, if we're gonna be bad, we better be able to be really bad. So, so we'll see. I mean, I think the best case scenario for all involved is Jordan Love is bad, but we don't want him to be that bad. Like, I need you to win like 5 to 6 games, man. You got to keep them far away from either of the top 2 slots in this draft. Because after that, I don't even know who quarterback 3 is in next year's draft. Right now, I think it's Texas Mullet Man, who does nothing for me in the here and now. So, so that was a really interesting draft on Green Bay's part, no doubt. And I
definitely a contender. A contender for the worst talent drafted if the Vikings didn't exist. So if you want to talk to them.
Yes, I mean, we'll go to the Vikings. Okay, and I'm treading on dangerous ground here because, God, I pissed off Vikings Twitter very badly because I had a flaming...
Somebody's sensitive. It's like Vikings fans can sense what's about to happen to their team, and they don't want to admit it.
It's so funny because Vikings fans all year long got so mad when people pointed out that they were a fluke. By every single statistical metric that we have ever determined for figuring out if a team is real or fake, they were fake, and everyone said this season is going to end with them getting just absolutely murgalized in the playoffs. And they got so mad about it, and of course that's exactly what happened. And it's not even like they have the decency to be like, well, at least we went out to the Eagles or the 49ers. You got curb stomped by the Giants. So Daniel Jones just all up in your shit.
Dropped a ball on your ass.
Yeah. So, anyways, I pissed off Vikings Twitter because I acknowledged that Jordan Addison is small, skinny, but not that fast. And historically, everyone in his cohort, people with his similar metrics to him and 40 times to him, this was the list we talked about on our wide receiver draft episode. But that list is a 0% hit rate. And it's funny because they jumped on my throat. And what I was saying is, I personally kind of like Jordan Addison when I watch him.
Yep.
Like, and if you, and this what we talked about, this was the draft of the slot receiver. It was the draft of the tiny wide receiver. Like, if you were taking a wide receiver, you better be comfortable with taking a small one, because that was basically all that was available. And so Jordan Addison, I think of any of those guys, has the best shot at being a useful NFL player. I do think he does things well. But I was saying I cannot shake the fact that this list exists, and the fact that if he is good, he would be the first guy in history, basically, with his specific measurables. And that was too much for them. They were all yelling at me. They threw out some of my favorite things, which are basically like, well, if he was taller and heavier and ran faster, we wouldn't even be having this discussion now, would we? And I'd be like, yeah, correct, you got me there. If he did not weigh 173 pounds, I wouldn't be worried that he weighs 173 pounds. They also, some of them hit me with, he's actually faster via GPS tracking. So I was like, oh, is that true? So I tried to look it up, and I found one place with GPS tracking that said he was only in the 50th percentile for speed. And they were like, well, that's not the GPS tracking we're talking about. And I was like, could you direct me to the one you're talking about? And they were like, well, it was on some guy's podcast. And I was like, that's great. We're having a really, you're hitting me with the hard data here. I appreciate that. But yeah, it's not that I think Jordan Addison's going to be a totally useless player. I think he's a very good route runner. But his size and everything else means he's probably a slot-only guy. And that really limits him, and then the lack of top-end speed really limits him there. I think, at best, that guy is maybe replacing what Adam Thielen gave you, and I don't mean like the Adam Thielen of yore. I mean the Adam Thielen last year, who caught had like 700 yards at like 10 yards per. I think he's he's going to be an okay underneath option. I think he's going to be, but I mean this is a pick that, and the funny thing about the Vikings is I can't really slam them for this pick, even as I was saying Addison on that list scares me, because they've put themselves in this box where they kind of had to do that, because they have refused. They have taken the old Bears route, really. They have refused to commit in either direction. They did not have the balls to tear down. They don't have the cap space at this point to go all in. So they kind of just need to keep reloading instead of rebuilding. And so at that point, and with the wide receiver run happening, and with Adam Thielen gone and the wide receiver free agent market being shit, as we said, like, you kind of have to take a chance on Jordan Addison there. He is, I will agree, he was the best wide receiver left at 23, but that goes to show why being stuck in this kind of win now mode that they're in, and needing to just find a replacement for Thielen instead of needing to take a good player there that you feel better about, really kind of fucks you. Because, like, yeah, wide receiver's a huge need for them. They needed to take a guy that was the best guy available with a lot of red flags. So, I mean, that's what they did. And that's the kind of shit that happens when you don't pick a lane. You are stuck talking yourselves into, well, maybe Jordan Addison can defy history and be more productive than any guy his size has basically ever been.
Yeah, we talked about the Vikings before last year, and what we said was this team is either going to have the one last ride year. They're going to everybody is going to have the last year they have in the tank, and they're going to win a bunch of games, and this is going to be it. And then next year they're going to fail, or last year was going to be where they all got old at the same time. The whole team fell apart because they are doing the Bears thing. They are going to let this team destroy itself. They're going to wait until it's completely done before they do anything about it. Last year, they had that last ride, and the statistics ended up showing that, yeah, it was a huge fluke. So they did it in the most incredibly 2001 Bears way they could. They went out there, they won a bunch of empty games, and then they got their butts kicked in the first playoff game they played. And they didn't have the balls to tear it down this year. I'm not sure how they would have tore it down, and maybe that's kind of what they're saying here. And in that way, I do understand getting another wide receiver, because what the hell else was gonna help you this year? You know, like, what were they gonna get that was gonna save them from what's coming this year? Probably nothing. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about Jordan Addison. He's a guy like Jaden Reed. He looks better than his metrics, way better than his metrics. You look at him on paper and you ask yourself why anybody would draft this kid. You watch him play and you say, God damn, he dominates people. But we've said this for the last couple weeks. I have no read on wide receivers in college, because there's a wide receiver on almost every college football team that looks that way, who you could say, man, he gets open. And he plays in a Power 5 conference. Like, you know, can't that guy play? Can't Charlie Jones play in the NFL? And I guess Jordan Addison is going in the first, Jaden Reed's going in the second, and Charlie Jones is going in the fourth. And I don't really see a big difference between any of these guys. Like you said, I think they're 700-yard guys at best. They're going to be slot wide receivers. And they aren't going to save Minnesota from what's coming. Honestly, the more interesting picks that they made in this draft were the only other two picks that we would care about. Their third and fourth rounders were massive reaches. Huge fucking reaches. Their third round pick, Mekhi Blackman, was going in the back half of the fifth round in mock drafts. Their fourth round pick, Jay Ward, was sixth round to undrafted. And these are guys who just don't stand out on tape. They're guys who you would expect to go fifth round or later, because not only do they not have the physical standing to make you think they could be starters in the NFL, they also just didn't put it together in college. And I don't understand what they were doing with either of those picks. So it feels like a one-pick draft to me, frankly. It feels like it's Jordan Addison, and that's kind of all they got. And man, if all you got is
when you only have
slot.
Well, I mean, when you only have one pick in the top 100, that's essentially what it is. It's a one-pick draft. The rest is a lotto ticket. They traded everything else that they had in the middle for T.J. Hawkinson, which, not a bad pick. I get that. One other thing I wanted to say about Addison, when you talk about, when you watch him on film and stuff, I had a lot of people say to me, like, well, how many of those small guys that you're talking about won a Biletnikoff? Like, he was that productive, blah, blah, he's the exception. And I was like, that's a good question. Let me look. So I went through and I looked at, and someone else said, basically every college wide receiver who has had a 1,500-yard receiving season at a Power 5 school has gone on to become a great NFL player. And I was like, okay, well, let me look. So I pulled up the list of every wide receiver who won a Biletnikoff or had 1,500 yards receiving at a Power 5 school. So not Anthony Miller or anybody like that. Power 5 school. And so the list since 2012 is Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Corey Coleman, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Hyatt, Amari Cooper, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Tyler Lockett, Marquise Lee, Jerry Jeudy, Jordan Addison, Stedman Bailey, James Washington, Dede Westbrook, Terrence Williams. Now that list, the order in which I read them, because you might have been like, wow, at the start you're probably like, wow, that's some really good wide receivers. This is a good list. And then towards the end you were like, oh yeah, I sort of remember that guy. He didn't do anything in the NFL. And you might have noticed that Jordan Addison is in with those guys. I sorted that list by the relative athletic score of those Biletnikoff winners. So, newsflash, if you win a Biletnikoff in college, and you have 1,500 yards receiving in college, and you are a motherfucking freak athlete who runs super fast, you end up becoming a pretty good NFL wide receiver, unless you're Corey Coleman and you get drafted by the Cleveland Browns, in which case, sorry, Corey, them's the breaks. But every other dude in that list, in the top half of that list, who had a relative athletic score, basically of 7 or higher, became a very good NFL wide receiver, other than Corey Coleman, because he got drafted by the Browns. But in the bottom of that list, you get down to Marquise Lee, was never anything. Jerry Jeudy is a good wide receiver, but I think most people would agree he's kind of been disappointing as a first-round pick, and is very kind of an inconsistent guy, has never quite been what you think he should be. Stedman Bailey was not really an NFL wide receiver. James Washington did nothing in the NFL. Dede Westbrook did nothing in the NFL. Terrence Williams did nothing in the NFL. All of those guys are who Jordan Addison is the peer of in terms of relative athletic scores. So these are all guys who looked good on film in college, who got separation and ran great routes in college. And what that tells you is there really is a limit to how much of an advantage being a great route runner is when it comes to the NFL, translating that from college. You really need to have the athletic ability to win somehow. We talked about this with Jackson Smith-Njigba. He doesn't have that great straight line speed. Him and Addison have that in common, but I expected Addison to sort of test a lot closer to JSN than he did. JSN crushed all of the agility stuff, crushed all of that stuff, and that to me is how you translate your great route running and everything at the NFL. You have the agility to make those sudden cuts, make those sudden moves. If Jordan Addison doesn't have that, and doesn't have top end speed, and doesn't have size, can't bully for the ball, I mean, that's just it is a red flag. And again, I don't think I don't think this guy is going to be useless. I don't think we're going to remember him quite like Stedman Bailey, where we don't remember him at all half the time. I do think he's a guy who's going to play in the league for a decent amount of time, but I feel like he's going to max out as like a 700, 800 yard a year slot guy, if that. And it's like that is useful, and the Vikings need that right now in their offense. But that's also a guy that you sometimes just find by chance in round 4. So that's a lot to pay for a guy that I think has a very limited ceiling because of his size and speed. So that's all there is to it. It's not that I'm not even saying it was a bad pick by the Vikings there, because I understand the situation they've. God damn, these allergies are killing me, folks. Sorry. The situation that they put themselves in, they needed to replace Adam Thielen. They needed to replace him immediately. And at pick 23, with the wide receiver run basically having already happened right in front of them, that was who was there. But it just speaks to how putting yourself in that situation, and we saw this with the Bears for so many years, putting yourself in that situation repeats itself and puts you in that situation consistently, because you are always making not necessarily bad picks, but you're making picks for short-term gain with limited ceilings, and you just keep getting yourself stuck in that purgatory where you can never really commit to one direction or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was just about as succinct as you can get. The Vikings are brothers in pain most often, and they are stuck in NFL purgatory right now. And when I say that they are about to have a very bad season, I don't mean that they're going to contend for the number 1 pick. I mean they're about to have one of those bad Bears seasons where they go like 6-11 or 7-10, and they end up with that annoying 13th or 14th pick, and then they get the 4th best defensive end or something. That's where the Vikings are at, and I'm sorry, guys. Like you said, there's no easy way out, because the way the draft plays out, you just keep doing it over and over again.
Yeah, and the one way that teams have found to get out is to trade up, give up a whole bunch and trade up and take a swing on a quarterback. But as we've seen, if you miss on that guy, you're double fucked, because you gave up all those picks just to get him. And even if you hit on that guy, you don't have picks left to build around him, so you can still end up stuck in purgatory for a little bit, even if he is a good dude, because you've hollowed out your roster to get him, as the Bears kind of did with Fields. So it's tough. They are in a tough spot, no doubt, and we actually sympathize, because that is, for the majority of our lives, the position that the Bears have routinely found themselves in, because they refuse to commit. And if there's one thing you can say about Ryan Poles, the motherfucker committed. God, did he commit? So, yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. That was the draft, folks. That was all of our draft coverage, I think. You started with us all the way back at the quarterbacks, and hopefully you have enjoyed us covering the draft, and we'll get together and figure out what the hell else there is to talk about in this now dead part of the off season. But yeah, that's what I got.
That's right. Well, Kyle, signing out. Tell me, did the NHL rig the draft for the Blackhawks?
100%.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Without question.
And we want to thank the NHL for that.
Yeah,
right?
no, I mean, again, if you are not a Blackhawks or Bears fan, you're listening to this and you're expecting us to be in denial about that, we're not. And the simple fact of the matter is, we don't give a shit. So
that's right. God damn it, they did the right thing.
Sucks to suck.
You need to give Connor Bedard to the Blackhawks. You did a great job, NHL.
Yeah, sucks to suck, losers.
That's right.
Maybe next time, try rooting for a team in a major media market instead of being from a small podunk town.
Yeah, like Los Angeles.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, hockey doesn't belong in Los Angeles. That's part of the problem.
It doesn't.
So. All right. Well, good night, folks.
All right. See ya.